we all believe the same thing about the plant, and we think it can change culture.
The burning weed with its roots in hell. It is too late.
Removing the stigma thread.
The message is out there. The flame is getting hotter.
And we're trying to turn that light on where we are in our community. What does this mean?
The Greenhouse Podcast.
Everyone, let's just make a little
We're
circle.
Gonna pray? Are we gonna
just
pray?
a little circle.
Set some intention.
The power of Heather Fazio is upon us. Heather, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Director, Texas for Responsible Marijuana Policy. Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy.
You can correct him if it's...
He's right on.
Yeah, you are a powerhouse in this state, and we are so inspired that you're here, and we're ready to gab.
Yes. Well, let's talk. We've got a great team, and the movement is strong in Texas. It's an exciting time to be an advocate.
Yes.
Awesome.
Where's your organization?
Yeah.
What's kind of a quick history of it, if you can give an overview?
Sure. Yeah. So the group we work with is a coalition. So it's kind of an umbrella organization. We work with about 25 different groups that span the political spectrum. So bringing people together that may come to this issue from different perspectives, may disagree on other issues, but we're living in such a politically polarized time in this country, and it's really refreshing to find an issue where people agree, where we're finding common ground. And that's why we're seeing this issue really advance in Texas. I started doing this work full time in 2014. I was recruited by the Marijuana Policy Project back in 2013 when I was working with Texans for Accountable Government.
Were you drawn to that? Were you kind of looking for something in cannabis, or were you?
I was not. I was recruited.
Yeah.
What did you think? Were you like the stoners are trying to get me?
Well, I had cared about this issue. I'd already been an advisor with Texas Normal, had been working with them at the Capitol since 2012.
Right.
Going and helping them with some of their materials and advisory capacity, meeting with legislators.
Plant you were definitely like part of helping it.
I had, because I cared about this deeply. I'm very libertarian personally. And so working with Texans for Accountable Government, I worked on building single issue coalitions based on mostly privacy and civil liberties issues.
Yes.
And so it was kind of a natural fit when we were looking, when MPP was looking to kind of put some resources into what's going on here and help kickstart the movement. And that's exactly what happened. We had wonderful groups like Texas Normal that had been kind of working on this for years and really getting started and working at the Capitol, stepping up the level of professionalism. And so we were able to collaborate and then bring into the fold many other organizations. And so it's been a heck of a ride over the last several years with things changing dramatically. When it comes to public opinion, lawmakers, just the fact that there is a seat at the table now for a meaningful professional conversation on marijuana policy, how it affects individuals, families, communities, and our state as a whole.
Yeah.
Oh my God. This is just, I'm so excited that you're here because every advocacy event I'm at, you are present. And so you are truly in the trenches. So one, I'm excited about what you have to share with us today. But two, you're the first female guest we've had on the Greenhouse Podcast.
Yay!
What?
Thank you. Yes.
Sorry for not recognizing that.
Hey, man.
Well,
awesome.
2020 is the centennial of women's suffrage. It is a big year in the U.S. Women have contributed significantly to this country. Well,
to human life.
To human life. But only just in the last.
Don't limit it.
But in the last 100 years, how things have taken shape and how women have been able to contribute, thanks to the women that worked so hard in a country that was called the land of the free.
Right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we had second-class citizens, not only women, but of course minorities as well. And breaking from that, and as we continue to evolve and grow as a country, hopefully moving in a direction of more freedom, more liberty, when it doesn't always feel that way.
Right.
But thankfully, we have technology that connects us like never before, the opportunity to communicate, build community, not just with those who are right around you, but those who are of like mind, who live maybe a little bit further than you would have met before, giving us a huge opportunity to really advance human freedom. And, that's what this country was founded on. And my hope, I care very much about cannabis, but on the bigger scheme of things, we need a significant change in this country back to the principles upon which it was founded. Right. And I think that people are getting very dissatisfied with the status quo, with the infrastructure that we have been subjected to in this country. And they're getting involved, getting active, communicating with each other, and making their voices heard. And that's why we're seeing so much change across the board, but also with cannabis in Texas.
Yes.
Yay! And you're like the shield maiden for us, really for the cause, pushing through towards liberty. But, and we're talking about cannabis today, right? But tomorrow it could be something totally different, but it's about liberty.
That's right.
It's beautiful. What, in terms of...
You're like, what's happening?
You're on the front lines right now. You have this incredibly storied past. What are you most excited about right now in terms of where things are tilting? Because we're in it from the business side, from the media side, and we're covering cannabis as, out there in that national scene that you speak of. We're seeing it, as this local thing, that it could be this potentially great for localization thing. What are you excited about in that tilt right now? And how hot is it really? Because it feels very hot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, prohibition is crumbling, and it is about time, right?
Prohibition is crumbling!
Yes, it is.
It's crumbling, dude.
That was
so
poetic.
we need to get to the meat of it.
Yes.
Texas regulations, right? I can't get my mind off of it. So
Yes.
you tell us where we are, because we know it was approved on January 22nd or 24th, late last month. What can we expect to see in the near future from Texas?
Well, and that is what's exciting, is that there is the infrastructure for regulation of cannabis is being instituted. And I don't want overregulation, overtaxation. We were talking earlier about the outrageous taxes in other states and how burdensome the regulatory schemes are that these governments have put in place. How can we in Texas do it right? How can we make sure that there's reasonable regulations in place to make sure that consumers are protected, that there's accountability, but also making sure that we're not creating high barriers to entry for Texans who want to enter the market, making sure that costs are low so that consumers can actually afford the product, especially when we're talking about very vulnerable people who have medical conditions who need access to cannabis. And what we're seeing now is that the regulatory infrastructure for the compassionate use program, our very limited medical program, is so overly burdensome that a license for the first 2 years is almost $500,000.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And this is for a product that they're competing with over-the-counter products because hemp is now legal. We're talking about 0.5% THC cannabis through the compassionate use program with the licensing fees that are outrageous. And it's not just $500,000 for the first 2 years.
No.
It's over $300,000 every 2 years after that, plus registration fees for your employees.
Most of them are negative at this point, right? Like they're
operating in the red.
pushing.
Can I just ask why? I mean, it's just like...
Why?
It's an excellent question. It is an excellent question. And, I have to say that, while there have been some disappointments with how things have rolled out, I think that the people at the Department of Public Safety who have been tasked with regulating this program have done a really good job considering the political pressure that they're under, the very narrow scope of this program. But we have to do better. We have to look at what does it actually cost to regulate this program. And I think that the licensing fees could be brought down as is, but as we move forward, as we work toward bringing patients safe and legal access to this medicine, more licenses will be, businesses will be licensed, and when there's more businesses in the market, the cost of regulation can be further diffused. So I think we need to bring it down and be reasonable, but we also need to expand this program so that patients have more access, and from the business perspective, things are more reasonable. And I'm really excited about this opportunity that we have to really get things right in Texas and be a leader on how to actually regulate this industry very well. But then also, I have to note, consumer responsibility is so critically important. We have freedom of association. We can choose who we do business with.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about it. Like the consumer does have their own responsibilities. Like
power to the people is all in with us as consumers. We choose who we do business with. So we have basic standards for safety, consumer protection, but we can go above and beyond in this industry. And businesses are going to respond when consumers are vocal about what they insist upon, whether it's their business practices, the services that they provide to consumers, and of course the quality of product.
Right. So exciting. I'm so glad you brought that up early and in parallel with, what we can do, and how we can vote and how regulatory fees are going to diffuse as more enter the market. I love that. It's so beautiful. So entering the market, oh my gosh, I wanted to bring something up because it's been burning. I learned about this issue in the potential regulation through an email that you'd sent from Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy. Got to plug that.
Best email on the market.
TexasMarijuanaPolicy.org.
If you want to know what's going on, get this newsletter.
Yes, and so I get the newsletter, and I'm skimming, and I'm like, what? They want to ban smokeable hemp flower?
Deep breath.
I mean,
But it gets worse.
Doesn't get better.
You two got to talk more.
No. I mean, in addition to the flower, they want to ban any CBD vapes. No, edibles.
smokables.
Okay.
Smokables, though, smokable product, and it's not just flower. Yeah, it is the smokable products. But
Vaping and smoking.
first thing I thought, though, is one of the most effective, the quickest ways to administer this medicine into our bodies is through our lungs, A, and B, isn't that the most cost-effective way, too?
Yeah.
If we don't
There's no processing.
put all the
there's
regulation.
minimal processing, but
Yes.
there's no heavy expense in providing the patient with that product, right?
Yeah, so
Totally
what do you do in Texas?
Right.
Let's think about the patients. Let's think about access. That was really just heartbreaking for me to see. And
here's
I wrote my
something
letter.
I have a hard time with. I read headlines every day.
Yeah.
Every single day. 9 times out of 10, they just blow away, right? Nothing ever really happens. Where are we with the smokeable thing? Is that part of the new regulations? Is that something?
This is all happening now. So we are very much in the midst of the regulatory process. So we have the infrastructure of the law, which is established through the statutes, through our lawmakers at the Capitol. And then the details are through the regulatory body. The Texas Department of Agriculture is regulating cultivation and manufacturing, and the Department of State Health Services is regulating consumable hemp products. We want to make sure that things are labeled, tested, that they're safe for consumers. And that makes sense. And most of their regulations are reasonable and look good. There's that one glaring problem where, in my opinion, they're overstepping their authority. In the statute, there's a prohibition on manufacturing or processing smokable or vapable hemp products in Texas. I think that was a mistake. The plant can be grown here, then it can be shipped out of state, manufactured, processed, and then sold here.
That's shooting ourselves in the foot.
It really is.
Well, the
are we
whole
doing
Midwest
that?
is doing this. Iowa's regulations are looking at you can grow it here, but you can't process it here. So they're looking at
winning?
just to be exporting.
Who's winning
Yeah,
in that?
why? Why
the
is that?
neighboring processing
Yeah, that's
facility.
really what
That's
we-
who's winning.
Are there interstate deals where we'll do your processing? Is it a brotherhood? Is it a sisterhood? Is it a? I mean,
It could be.
Yeah, but I think it's open to whoever you network with. You might be, and this is where we get into the different issues of ag and like, you don't grow in California and ship it to New Jersey to get processed and then ship it to Texas to get sold.
Right.
Like, how is that doing anybody a service at that point, right? This is a perishable product. It's I think it's a grain, right? Is that what they're classifying it as at the USDA level? It's something that needs to be, as we were talking about, localized. It needs to come from your immediate surroundings.
Right. Heather, we've talked about this before as this sort of behind the times optimism, where we're like, Texas has been behind the times. We've watched a lot of cannabis systems in states like balloon, kind of fail, really be successful. Different states having different metrics on it, mostly successful. And we've been behind on it. And so we're watching all these potentialities fail and rise and fail and rise. So we have a lot of information to collect from. Are we at a point in terms of our voting cycle where that sort of behind the timesness can have an effect on the vote? Does that make any sense?
So can the populace because we're with the times.
Consumer. We're the consumer, we're the voter.
Well, and not only consumers, non-consumers are tired of seeing prohibition enacted in Texas.
Good point,
Yes.
They're tired of it. I would venture to say that the 86% of Texans who want to see our marijuana laws reformed, majority of them aren't consumers. But they're paying to incarcerate their neighbors.
Right.
They're paying for their
children,
nephews, their kids to go to jail over simple possession. When, according to DPS, it's 80,000 people a year, according to a new memo they just released.
They're good at their job.
80,000 people a year. And
year.
so they're paying for that. But then I think also these non-consumers are also recognizing that this is a viable, it's a viable medicine. And why are we being kept from that?
That's right.
Whether or not I want to use it, give me the right. In states that have medical marijuana programs, their Medicare's down. It has a trickle-down effect to all of us, whether you're
Workers'
using
comp
it or
is
not.
down. That's a crazy thing. Workers' comp is down because they're finding relief from medical marijuana.
Yes.
In these legal states, but.
Yeah.
It's a play, right? It's a play for money. Like, do they make more money on the private prison system versus the taxation of legal products? Like, let's not go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah,
You do a little bit of scope drift.
One tunnel of the rabbit hole, because then you get into civil asset forfeiture. You get into the grants that they get from the federal government. And we've heard from law enforcement in Texas, and what they talk about is that this is a slippery slope to legalization. That once you give people a little bit of freedom, they're going to want more freedom.
Well,
God forbid.
Right,
here in America.
That's a negative thing.
But that's what they talk about in those terms. And I think that it has to do not just that decriminalization would maybe cut into their ability to search cars for no other good reason, circumventing probable cause for people that they just want to target. But also because if we do legalize, then those sources of revenue are not coming in. And while I think that it's reprehensible that we would justify criminalizing, caging, branding for life people in our own state for possession of marijuana for budgetary purposes, it's a very real problem that we have to help them to solve and to reconcile to help to bring them on board. So we have to find ways for the people who have been our opponents for so long, the people that were terrified when that red, white, and blue flip up in our rearview mirror, it's terror that we all feel.
Right.
But instead transitioning into how can we make alliances with lawmakers, with law enforcement, so that we can find our path forward. Because it's not going to be a battle where we run up against each other like it is on the ballot.
Right.
In Texas, we don't have ballot initiatives. Right. So it's not like the question is on, you're dueling, and we're going to win that way. Yeah. We have to influence here in Texas. We have to earn support from people who were our opponents before.
Wow.
It takes money. And I'll tell you that the cannabis industry would do well to start getting involved in campaigns and contributing to our allies, those who do support reform, making sure that we're ensuring that they have the resources they need to come back and serve us in the Texas legislature. And this is one big opportunity that we have. This is how
seems like a
government works.
It
this
seems
is how
like a
politics
no-brainer.
works.
It would seem like a no.
But again, we talk about the nucleus of the cannabis industry being the hippies, right? The hippies have been so anti-government and anti-establishment that it's hard to get involved. It's hard to turn that page and say, you know what, I'm going to be an advocate for this. I'm going to go get politically involved. Like, that's a huge leaf to turn.
Yeah.
We've been so, and I'm speaking for myself, but like in all the people I know, we've been so anti-establishment that it's almost scary to go to the Capitol. It's almost scary to go to so just to touch on the police thing real quick, we tried to educate local municipalities around our establishments, the difference between hemp and marijuana.
Yeah.
Right.
We were literally told, I don't know if we've spoken about this before, but we were literally told that they don't want the education because it removes their probable cause. To our face.
Willful ignorance.
Willfully staying
It's
ignorant.
immoral.
It's an
How
issue.
shameful.
Willful
It's
immoral.
It's a sad story.
But
Willful
what's good is they were
immorality.
honest.
I
can appreciate them being honest to help us understand.
Right.
But otherwise, we keep racking our brains. I don't understand this.
Yeah.
Right. And that helps us to understand where they're coming from. So now how do we address that?
Right.
And how do we cut to the core of what their arguments are?
Truly.
Wow, Heather, do you foresee this next voting cycle something really great happening? Do you think we're going to see change within the next 2 years in Texas? I mean, if it doesn't federally legalize somehow.
Sure.
You know?
Well, I do think that there's going to be big change coming at the federal level, regardless of what party is in power. I think that the pressure has mounted enough. And frankly, it would serve the current sitting office holder very well for re-election if they legalized marijuana nationwide. But how are things going to be affected in Texas? So first of all, we have to say that the governor and lieutenant governor are not up for election in 2020. And one of our biggest hurdles was the lieutenant governor in 2019, but he's not up for election this time. So, well, no. That means that he's going to be with us in 2021.
Take those clapbacks. Reverse clap.
That's why we need you. That's why we need to meet on the regs, Heather. I need you.
Well, so they're not up for election, and they're the statewide leaders. Governor Abbott has actually been very open to conversations on this. He has evolved on the issue. That's
good to hear.
And for so long, we feel like we're just going up against a brick wall with some of these lawmakers, but then we realize that they can hear us on the other side of that wall. There's no give until in 2018 on live television, Governor Abbott says he's in favor of decriminalization, and advocates, especially veterans and parents of those with special needs, are making effective arguments on medical marijuana. Incredible. And it's all because of the persistence of people going to their offices, emailing them, calling them, keeping it up, even though we feel like we're not winning all the time. We are winning, and we just have to be persistent. And I think that was demonstrated with Governor Abbott's shift. He is not on our side entirely. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
He has been a hurdle for us.
Yeah.
But he is a demonstration of how conservatives are evolving on this issue based on the feedback that people are getting. That these are real Texans, average people that want to see these laws changed, and they can identify with that. Our bigger hurdle is lieutenant governor. I think we have to just do the same thing with him. Make sure that he's visiting with people. People are meeting with him, that he's constantly hearing from the families that are being negatively affected by this deprivation of medicine.
Right.
I mean, this hindrance to freedom, to, medical freedom. We talk about getting government out of healthcare, and I'm personally all on board. Let's be consistent. Let's make this a decision between doctors and patients. Allow doctors to practice medicine. Who can benefit from cannabis? What the dosing should be.
Yes.
That's another thing to talk about is the restriction on THC in our compassionate use program. It's basically medical hemp.
Pointless.
0.2 of a percentage more.
Right.
And pointless, irrelevant in a lot of ways.
What's the thought process behind that?
The regulation on that is just
but it establishes an infrastructure.
Yes.
So we can look at that as the silver lining, that we have a foundation to build upon. There need to be changes with the regulations.
Yes.
There need to be changes
This was
with
their
the scope.
give. Yeah.
This is their good. Yeah, and we do feel, and it is every step forward is a blessing. There's no doubt. But it hurts to know people in the community, people in your families who are suffering. They don't have access, and it's just like it doesn't feel Texan.
No, it does not.
We tippy toe.
We're behind Arkansas. Y'all, we are behind
What about
Arkansas,
Oklahoma?
Louisiana.
Oklahoma.
Louisiana.
Said that on live TV. I told you not to tell her that.
No, but it's true. Oklahoma done beat us.
Yes.
Everything.
Arkansas.
I think every state that touches Texas is legal, right?
Indeed, including Mexico as well.
Right. So what's
Mexico.
the here? So let's reverse real quick. The 0.3% that classifies hemp as hemp was basically a number thrown out at a meeting
Arbitrary.
as an example of, hey, we need to set a limit.
Yeah.
Like 0.3.
Call it 0.3.
Okay, 0.3. There it is.
0.3,
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Like, what is and the 0.5
good.
is. Like
It's just
you
a little
might get a little bit
You
more
don't want to
THC,
double it,
but you're not
you
getting
can't double it.
Right. It's
So when this originally passed in 2015, hemp was still in a gray area. So we had the 2014 federal farm bill that created ambiguity in the federal law. It defined hemp as any cannabis at 0.3%, but didn't remove it from the Controlled Substances Act.
Okay.
So what we saw between 2014 and 2018 is what I think was the most pervasive example of civil disobedience that we've seen in this country, because there was enough ambiguity that business owners took the risk and got involved. And that's why we saw this boom of the hemp and the CBD industry.
Right.
So in 2014, though, it was still a gray area. So the establishment of the compassionate use program created a path for completely legal, low THC cannabis. And so in that moment, for some people, that created a kind of a safe place for them to get that medicine. Now, though, fast forward to 2019, the federal government's legalized hemp. the state government has legalized hemp, and our compassionate use program is still stuck at 0.5% THC. And they did expand the list of qualifying conditions, which is good. There were a few conditions. Well, in the statute, it's barely, but you look at the regulations of incurable neurodegenerative disorders, it's over 100 specific conditions. That's awesome. So there's still many of them are very rare.
At the patient level, like, do we have a count on how many active patients are in Texas?
So from the beginning of 19 to the end of 19, it almost doubled the number of patients. From 700-ish a little under 800 patients to about 17 to 1,800 patients.
Hey, that's
and there's
so 1 year.
But there's three licenses in Texas.
Only one that was really active.
Right,
We're talking
one
about
active.
700, like, with no zeros behind it.
What's the population of Texas?
Yeah, I mean,
We're the
it's
third
27
largest-
million.
27 million.
It's embarrassing
27
that
million.
there's still
It's
a
just
tiny
like-
number.
Right,
And the
right.
qualifiers is less than 2 million potentially qualify.
embarrassing.
when we have this, we have
Product you can get over the counter.
Right.
We don't have the highest
Next
number
door.
of veterans. We used to, but we don't any longer. They're in California.
Right.
Now they're in Florida. They need their medicine, and I guess, there's that's a whole different ball of wax with the federal government, the VA, but it's about taking care of your people, Texans. It feels like we are a very free state, and we care about each other and we care about our communities. So I think at every level, you can make the argument for legalization and freedom of a plant. It's nothing to be afraid of.
That might be patented
Either.
by somebody. There might be some patents out there
Yeah.
already
Might
in
be some
existence on some
In the name of the US
cannabinoid.
government.
Right.
Well, you know what? You can say you own it, but I'm growing it in my closet. So no.
Yeah.
What is what do you are so I think you're a realist, but I do find optimism in everything you say. You're a silver liner, and
Yes.
and I appreciate that. What are you most excited about in terms of just the kind of the nearest future, like this next voting cycle in Texas?
Yeah, well, voting, of course, is important. And I think that we're going to see maybe significant. We're going to see change. Let me just say that.
We're going to see change.
We're going to see change.
You see
happen.
candidates in Texas
vote.
running on a pro-cannabis platform.
You do. For the first time, we're seeing cannabis commercials for candidates.
Oh, which ones?
Like Representative Gutierrez is running
Oh,
for
yes.
Senate
Okay.
now. And
Yes.
he's done several videos, and he's been really championing this issue.
Yay.
And more people are talking about it, not only Democrats, but conservatives as well. So I think that the demographics in Texas are changing, not only in age, but ethnicity and political leanings are changing. We are stuck in a two-party system. I think that there's room for other parties as well.
Agreed.
Coming on board. Of course, we have three parties in Texas: Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians. Within each of those parties, there are supporters of reform. And the more voters get active and engaged, the further we can bring them in time for the next legislative session.
Right.
Yeah.
So we worked with Texas Normal, who established a voter guide in 2012, and we've been working together to expand our reach. And we surveyed the candidates running for the Democratic and Republican nominations within the primary election, which is on March 3rd. So by the time this airs, hopefully everybody's already voted.
Yes.
But that's when the parties choose what candidate they're going to put on the ballot in November. And so this is the beginning of the race for November. And we want to make sure that as many pro-cannabis candidates are nominated and then moving on to the general elections. And I'll tell you that it's 6 days after that November election that they start introducing legislation. So we have to be ready. So we're at the end of February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. We are 9 months away from introducing legislation in Texas for our next legislative session.
Wow.
It seems like, because we're on a 2-year cycle,
Oh my
it seems
God.
like forever between sessions. But then you start thinking
not.
about it.
Yeah.
Start thinking about the election. Start thinking about the different events going on between now and then, and all the opportunities, the town halls, the forums, all the candidate receptions. We can sign up for the email list for not only the candidates in our area, but for the local political parties. They host events all the time that are free and open to the public,
Yes.
where you can go and connect with these folks, not only lawmakers, but other community leaders that maybe just needed someone to bring up the conversation so that they can feel comfortable talking about it.
Yes.
This is our opportunity to really permeate through the political sphere with making sure that cannabis is at the forefront, is being talked about. It's one of the most popular issues in politics today, it's a winner. Like if
you have-
candidates want to win, be popular and support reform.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me
Real
like
quick, is there a consolidated list or a location where one can go and find all the events that they need to attend?
There is not.
Okay.
Which is why I recommend signing up for the email lists of the candidates in your area and the local political parties. So Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians all have county parties. So they're local, and those email lists are where you're going to get updated on events that are going on. I would love to see a consolidated cannabis calendar
Yeah.
because there are so many events popping up. People getting excited about this, hosting
Yes.
CLEs, hosting conferences, hosting networking hours.
Right.
And so having that consolidated place would be great. One recommendation I'd have for those who want to connect is joining the Texas Cannabis Collective. I work very strictly on policy, but there's a whole nother cultural side of this movement as well. And they've done a really great job of cultivating that space and creating a platform for everyone to kind of help to collaborate. And so we're obviously posting policy updates, election updates, but then other folks are posting other educational updates, networking events, business opportunities. We're a very pro-business state, or so we say we are. And so how can we make Texas a comfortable state for the cannabis industry?
So it's just what I'm hearing though is more of we've got to take responsibility. If we want to see this change, we have to know what's happening at the community, the county level, in Texas. And so it's a wonderful wake up call for us. Thank you so much. It's but also about finding this information. Maybe we can work together with Texas Cannabis Collective and
Cannabis calendar.
Yeah, Cannabis calendar.
like it.
Cannabis calendar. We need to know
Canna
this Canna
calendar.
calendar.
And a calendar.
And we need to give people the information that they need to see
Right.
this change
Right.
because that's all it takes.
Yeah.
We have a system in place, right? We have you to save us. Okay, no, I mean really, we've got people who are speaking on behalf of this plant so elegantly
Right.
and beautifully, and in a way that isn't divisive.
Right.
But
you have to also keep in mind the hardest thing is, 90% of us are going to work every day, doing our
right.
thing
Yes.
outside of this, right? To separate yourself from reality and go spend the time to look up all these events and figure out where the plays are. It's very difficult, right? We've created a debt scope drift, but we've created a debt-based society where everybody's climbing to get out of debt for 60, 70 years of their life. They don't have time to deviate from going to work for 60 hours and then coming home and making food for the kids, making sure they have their homework done, getting them bathed. Guess what? Tomorrow, same agenda, right? So they end up 80, 90 years old at Walmart greeting people because they couldn't save enough because they were just paying their bills because they had to pay back school and the nice car they wanted and the house they wanted. And we're stuck in this rut of like, how does one actually find the time to step out and get involved? Like those are the hurdles that us as a community have to figure out how to overcome.
Power of social media.
We
sure.
absolutely do. And what can we do? And we can help get the information out there and help provide the links. But you can feed a man fish, and what happens? He just gets fat.
Right.
You teach him to fish, and he gets a 6-pack, and he's fat, and he's taking care of his family.
I've never heard that saying before.
Yeah,
but
that's
I
how
get it.
it
I get
goes.
it.
That's how it goes. But you've got to, if this is what the change that you want,
Right.
then fucking do
Gotta
something.
fight for
Like
it.
we're
Right,
doing something.
right, right.
We can all do something.
Well, and two things on your point. You kind of mentioned separating from reality. And in a large part, for a lot of people, it feels that way because politics is not your life.
Right,
You're
right.
living in real life what matters.
see it every
People,
2 years.
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. And you go and you vote, and that's
Right.
about it. But I'll tell you, especially for those who are in business, knowing your lawmakers, knowing your county commissioners, knowing the
Be a
people
huge
who
advantage
make
to you, yeah.
decisions in your area is a very good thing. Having those
It's almost
relationships,
vital, right?
That's
But-
right. And so when you're talking about other things in your area, zoning issues, slip in a little bit about cannabis. Those opportunities. So think about it that way, understanding who is governing us and how can we be actively engaged, because that's the only way our government is going to actually accurately reflect our values is if they know us, and that's the only way they can represent us.
Right.
So I would recommend people looking at it holistically. Look at this as a full approach. But then also, people can't get involved all the time.
Right.
Watching all these bills, keeping track of them, the federal, the state level, the House, the Senate, Democrats, Republicans, House committee hearings, full Senate, debates on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
It's so difficult to keep up with, especially because the legislative session is 140 days. It's a sprint at that point.
Yeah.
So getting involved with advocacy organizations that are sending out action alerts, that are helping to break down the process and what's happening is critical. And we're working with 25 different organizations, and we're a nonprofit ourselves that are working to make sure that these emails are going out, and they're helping that. So contributing to the advocacy efforts that are going on now is a great way for people who are on their grind, raising their families, running their businesses, doing what they can, and contributing in every way we can. We know that there are millions of supporters of cannabis in Texas. So if we're all contributing a little bit, doing our part, making that phone call when the email goes out or sending that quick email, it's going to make a difference. We know it's making a difference. We've generated tens of thousands of phone calls and emails to the Capitol to the point where sometimes lawmakers said, "Can you turn it off?
Right.
Can you turn it off while we're trying to fix the problem?" But that's a beautiful thing for us to have that much of a commanding presence.
But congratulations to your work. That's a direct result of your work.
Thank you. Our team, we've got a great
pounding
team.
the gate,
Yes.
like that's you've been at the
It's
forefront
needed.
of that.
It's needed. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
definitely want to help you in any way possible.
Great.
It's about getting the information out there, making it easy to take action.
Well, and this kind of media is critically important. Like we
Yes.
mentioned, community community being built based on technological reach that we have now. Doing podcasts like this, reaching millions of people, not just Texans, but around the country who are interested in seeing what's going on in other states, what's happening in Texas. Maybe people that are interested in business opportunities. What's the political climate look like? When am I going to be
That's
able to jump in?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that getting involved right now is going to help set people up to be on that ground floor when we actually establish a medical marijuana program, a real one in the state of Texas. And ultimately, when we repeal prohibition entirely and establish an adult use market.
Right.
Yes.
Do you idealized the what would happen if we federalized at the federal level, legalized it before we did it at the state level? Have you idealized that future?
So November's our last
absolutely.
chance, right? Basically, because we are all kind of in agreement that federally something's changing with whatever happens at the federal level.
Right. I think that that's
But what happens?
Well, we still have all of our state laws in place.
Right.
And so repealing federal prohibition, which ideally is just plucking cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act,
Right.
not establishing a federal regulatory infrastructure or a federal tax on cannabis. This can be done by the states the way that the Constitution intended with the 9th and 10th Amendments, but don't let me mention up the pesky amendments, right? The Bill of Rights.
Heather, you're such a buzzkill.
But letting the
I think that
states decide
expired.
and allowing interstate commerce and allowing best practices to prevail in competing markets. That's what I would like to see. And I think we can do that by just, like, as I mentioned, removing cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act. But then we have work to do in Texas. So as with alcohol prohibition, that was instituted at the federal level, repealed after only 13 years of terrible policy. Meanwhile, we've lived over decades under marijuana prohibition that has resulted in the same violence and unsafe products that we've seen. But we won't have to get into all that. Preaching to the choir. But we still have the state laws to repeal, because even after alcohol prohibition was repealed, we still have dry counties in the state of Texas.
Right.
So we have to make sure that we are actively engaging. And just a side note, the dry counties are largely that way because of the alcohol companies that operate just outside of county lines, lobbying those county commissioners to keep it the way that it is, making sure that the Bible thumping folks are in there talking about how they can't have it. And so,
you can
it's
have your
interesting.
business here, but keep it out of here.
Yeah, well,
Right,
you
right.
see how business interests affect our government when they're making decisions about with a market rather than having an actually free market. Lobbyists and business interests are always going to be in there. That's why it's necessary for the cannabis industry to be in there. This is a market that is heavily regulated by prohibition first and foremost, but now by overly burdensome regulatory infrastructures, which we seem to be doing a pretty good job actually with what we have so far in Texas, but other states are a mess. I mean, we're talking about California, where we have stacks on stacks on stacks of regulations and outrageous taxes that are leading to consumers just going to the black market. They would prefer to buy it from the guy they've always bought it from for 40% less than going to a legal market.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that there's even storefronts in place right
illegal
now.
Storefronts.
Illegal storefronts because they'd rather pay the fine
Right.
than have to comply with the burdensome
They can
regulations.
It's
It's insane.
Well, 80%,
It is absolutely
so fun
insane and
fact,
counterintuitive.
80% of the legal market in California is black market products. They just don't have the infrastructure to regulate what's on the shelf. So
Wow.
You know what's crazy?
Fun fact.
You don't have to. Fun fact. You don't have to throw a rock very far to hit illegal grows. In Los Angeles.
So back
It
to
would
what
blow
we
your mind.
touched on earlier, up in Northern California, I won't point the county out, but the county sheriff there literally is quoted as saying, "If I get 4 federally prosecutable arrests, I secure my funding for the year." So it's publicly known.
So who's it going to be?
Cartel.
Yeah.
So he goes out into the national forest, cartel busts. But now the 1,500 illegal grows in that county know they're safe from prosecution because this guy has his funding. He can now pay his staff. Everything's copacetic for the year.
Yep.
That's how that green emerald triangle came kind of into existence. Is like, hey, we got our money. We don't care what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
I mean, that's corruption.
Mm-hmm.
That's corruption. That's an uneven enforcement of the law. We saw it happen with alcohol prohibition, and we're seeing it with marijuana. It's just, we have to put a stop to it.
It's sick. We absolutely do. And it's almost as if it's like, oh, well, it's okay because it was marijuana.
Right.
There's still that stigma and still kind of hanging on to the old ways of thinking opportunistically. Not maybe believing them, but I see a lot. I feel like government is playing on that. And it's just it's bullshit.
They've set the system up for failure. First of all, like like Nebraska has total THC, right, which is not only Delta 9 but THCA combined. There's one plant currently that grows under 0.3%. If you grow it full term.
Right.
And that's a CBG specific plant. Dilemma is they bred out all the terpenes. We're now finding out how important the terpenes are. Mm-hmm. That's been bred out so that the THC content will stay below what it's supposed to be. So this year we saw an influx of CBG production. Next year we're going to see even more of an influx. But that system is literally created for failure. Like there is no way your farmers can prosper when they're all growing the exact same crop.
Right.
And it's all, it's just
it's lack of understanding. It's making laws and regulation on, a very little understanding of the actual plant. What are you regulating? Like we've got to step back and really try to understand
into the position,
what's going on.
But they're not, most of them aren't, I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but they don't want to be in that political position to help write and mandate what should be, but they're the ones who understand the industry. We've touched on it before. Mm-hmm. This has been an industry before legalization, right? It's been a multi-million-dollar industry for many decades. Yeah. The hippies who have been involved in it have had the issues that we're having currently, and they've found ways to get around it without regulation. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying we don't need regulation because I've seen some pretty unsanitary things within the industry. So I think regulation is a necessity, but over-regulation becomes an issue.
Absolutely does.
It does. And I mean, just to say that the hippies don't want to be politically involved, I mean, you are. You're politically involved. If you love this plant and you live in this country, sorry, you've got to take a stand. And it's not fair, to be in that position where it's just abundant around you and, laws are changing because other people are putting their lives on the line. Right. It's like we've all got to do our part.
Well, there's a lot of stepping out of comfort zones happening right now, whether it's those who have traditionally not been involved in politics stepping in for the first time, whether it's the hippies, as you referenced, the marijuana farmers,
we love the
or
hippies.
Doctors that are getting involved for the first time. They believe in
yeah.
this, but are not quite sure about stepping out. What's that going to mean for their career?
Not enough studies behind it.
Because of the federal government, dissecting that. But lawmakers need to hear from more medical professionals. I'll tell you that right now.
Okay.
Because the cap on THC is arbitrary, it's unreasonable, it has to go. But the people that are going to make that argument best are going to be doctors to demonstrate the medical efficacy of THC. For example, Alzheimer's is a qualifying condition under the current compassionate use program. But we know that it's THC that breaks up the plaque in the brain.
Right.
With autism included, thanks to the work of a tremendous group of mothers, primarily. Mothers advocating medical marijuana for autism. They have done just such a great job of really making this real, making it real for lawmakers. This is what our family is dealing with. Yes. But even with autism, low THC cannabis may help sometimes. But for the self-injurious children, for the aggression that comes, especially as maturity sets in and adults are living with autism, THC is what helps to calm that. With pain, it's THC that helps to get people off of opiates, helping veterans, for example, to sleep through the night when they're suffering from PTSD. So we need to expand the program, not only with qualifying conditions, but also removing that arbitrary cap on THC.
Yes, I'm so glad that you said that.
Fun fact real quick.
Number 2.
CBD alone can't, I think we've spoken about this, but CBD alone cannot cross the blood-brain barrier without THC. THC actually carries CBD past the blood-brain barrier for the neurological issues. So,
come on, brother, you're coming with me. That's THC.
There's a relationship between THC and CBD.
They
need each other.
Like a schoolhouse rock.
Exactly. Gotta go.
Or the magic school bus.
Whatever it takes to educate.
The government's patent is for neurological issues like that. Right. That's, I mean, it's just
neuroprotectant.
A neuroprotectant. Thank you very much. Yet the testing that's needed. Dilemma with even the doctor speaking is everything's anecdotal, right? There's
in large part. There's some studies in Israel, not in U.S. studies, but international studies.
Fun fact. Our government actually funds a lot of those studies in Israel.
Exactly
through our aid to them?
Say it again?
Like directly or just through our aid to them?
No, I think directly to the
like,
University
hey, find out
of
about
Israel.
this weed stuff.
Holy shit.
They have, I think we've spoken again, they have a 7-story institute there with doctors and scientists. It takes, I think, $4 to $6 million a month to study cannabis there. They have it on their ambulances now, right? For seizures and all kinds of different things. It's just a whole different world. From here to Colorado, a whole different world. Here to Israel, forget about it. It's interesting. But they're doing it on our dime, so.
Well, so we should be able to benefit, and I just want to get back to what you were saying about doctors and the importance of having doctors and medical communities speak up. Even though, I mean, hey, we know where all the research articles are. Okay, we can all fucking Google.
The Mayo Clinic
But now it's time to start talking about what I know, and as the person who cares for my community, this is not okay. So is there anywhere the medical community can come together, any organizations that you know of that we could plug?
Absolutely.
Where members of the medical community could find that and become equipped with the information.
Well, there's lots of different groups sprouting up. CME, continuing medical education that can be taken online. That's available for doctors who want to learn more. Do it in the privacy of their own home, get them comfortable. But there is an organization that we work with, Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. It's a national group, but their political chair is Dr. Brian Adenoff, who's an addiction psychiatrist, recently retired from Southwestern Medical Center up in Dallas, worked with the VA for years, is incidentally now living in Colorado because that's where his family lived. But he has been a tremendous ally, and getting more doctors involved through that group is really important. There's also a Association of Cannabis Specialists, I believe is what it's called. That may not be right, but Dr. Tischler is leading that. He's on the East Coast, but another group focused on doctors and getting medical professionals involved. And of course, we'll continue to work with the doctors that want to get engaged, kind of, how does the process work? Where are we? Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? And we're going to be hosting the 3rd annual Texas Marijuana Policy Conference at the end of August. So we'll be featuring medical professionals and hoping to bring in folks who want to just learn what the landscape looks like. We're going to have a track based on the legality, what the laws are, and advocacy as far as criminalization. We haven't even gotten into talking about decriminalization. There's so much to talk about. But then talking about the science and medical cannabis and advocacy. And we'll also have a 3rd track on the industry. So helping people who want to get involved in the cannabis industry, learning the ins and outs of taxes and HR, of accounting, security build-outs, best practices, all the different different things that are important, not only for businesses, but also for consumers and watchdog organizations, making sure that we're holding each other to a high standard. Again, coming back to consumer responsibility, nonprofits or for-profits that can exist to really set the bar so that we're going above and beyond, ensuring that this product is safe, that it's going to be helpful, and that we have a culture within the cannabis industry of giving back and making sure that things are held to a high standard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Heather,
yes.
when we got to Texas and started doing what we were doing, we were looking. I remember looking, like, who is out there doing things in cannabis? I want to know him. I got to meet him. And finding you was like turning the lights on. And you've been very influential in how we've told stories in the past 2 years and what's important to Texas and or the national scene. And you were a big part of turning us on to where the fight was.
Yeah.
And so you're just you're well respected, and we're just so grateful for the work you do. I would like to close out with one just final thought from you in terms of what does the future in 10 years look like for Heather Fazio? What's that?
Oh, for Heather Fazio.
Yeah. What is Heather Fazio's 10-year, like, what does she think happens?
You know, the world has changed so much in 10 years that it's hard to say what the world looks like in 10 years from now. But I can tell you that I hope that we're living more freely. I hope that people are not suffering under marijuana prohibition and that our rights are better respected by the government that is supposed to be instituted to protect them. We have systems in place to make this the freest country that's ever existed in human history. And I hope that we regain that inspiration to take back control of it, understanding that all power is within the people and that we can take control of the direction of this country, of our society, by actively engaging with each other, with lawmakers, and building the kind of a free country that we want to see and live under.
Is cannabis that catalyst?
I think in large part it can be. I think that once we get for me, when I first got involved, I got a win under my belt. There was, I'm not going to get into the campaign, but there was a local campaign involving law enforcement, and we had a big push, and we won. And it was great because we built relationships with law enforcement, with a coalition here locally, and it lit a fire under me, knowing what it tastes like to win, what it feels like to win. And I think that once people get a taste of it with the cannabis win, that hopefully that inspires them, whatever their issues are.
Yes.
The foundation is the same, of building relationships, communicating effectively, and being persistent. That's the recipe.
You are so amazing, Heather. How can people find you?
TexasMarijuanaPolicy.org is our website. Definitely sign up for emails, contribute. You can become a sustaining member to help the work that we're doing. And look out for the Texas Marijuana Policy Conference this last weekend of August. We've got our website up and everything is developing. Registration opens soon. If you have speaker recommendations, we're going to be taking that. We're also going to have sponsors, so we're going to need support. So definitely looking forward to continuing to collaborate with you all. I appreciate the opportunity and really getting this done.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Wow, let's end it with a hand circle again.
One more hand circle. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.